The holographic display sphere in Lecture Hall 7 Gamma rotated slowly, casting pale blue light across 300 horrified faces. Professor Kethvorn stood at the crystalline podium, his semi-translucent lavender skin catching the glow as he gestured with both arms toward the spinning death statistics. "Class, observe," he chimed, his vertical mouth resonating through the acoustic architecture. "Planet designation, Earth. Atmospheric composition, 21% oxygen." A collective gasp rippled through the tiered seating. Someone in the back row fainted. The soft thud of their body hitting crystalline floor echoed beautifully. Professor Kethvorn's four violet eyes, arranged in their perfect diamond pattern, swept across his students with the satisfaction of 847 years of academic authority. His crystalline back spines caught the light as he straightened to his full 7 feet. "Yes," he continued, allowing the horror to settle. "Oxygen. The corrosive element that dissolves metal ignites spontaneously and—" A hand went up in the middle section. Professor Kethvorn's segmented tail clicked against the floor. He did not appreciate interruptions during his dramatic reveals. "Questions will be held until—" "Sorry, quick thing." The hand belonged to a small creature he didn't recognize. Pinkish, bilaterally symmetrical, oddly smooth, 2 arms, 2 legs, approximately 5.5 feet tall. Unremarkable, really. "I'm from there." The holographic sphere flickered. Professor Kethvorn's skin shifted from lavender to a confused mauve. "I beg your pardon? Earth. I'm from Earth." The creature, female, he noted, based on the voice, lowered her hand and immediately began rummaging through a bag at her feet. "Also, has anyone seen a sock? Gray, kind of fuzzy, has a small hole near the toe that I keep meaning to fix, but honestly at this point it's got character." The lecture hall had gone completely silent. Zix Tari, Professor Kethvorn's graduate teaching assistant, sat frozen in the front row. Her 2 amber eyes with their horizontal pupils had locked onto the human. Her iridescent green scales were beginning to flush orange at the edges, a stress response she usually reserved for exam periods and family reunions. "You," Professor Kethvorn's chiming voice cracked slightly, "are from the planet currently displayed on my holographic death sphere?" "Yep." The human, Harlow, according to the enrollment records he was now desperately trying to recall, had given up on the sock search and was now holding a cylindrical container. She took a long sip from it. "Anyway, sorry, you were doing a thing. Please continue. This is really interesting." Professor Kethvorn's crystalline facets began clicking against each other, a sound like wind chimes in a nervous breakdown. His skin flickered through mauve to a concerning violet. "The oxygen," he managed. "You breathe the oxygen." "Oh, absolutely. Love the stuff. Can't get enough of it, really." Harlow nodded enthusiastically. "Fun fact, if you don't breathe it for about 3 minutes, you die. Well, brain damage first, then death. The order matters for insurance purposes, apparently. Which reminds me, does anyone here have a good recipe for lemon bars? I promised my thesis advisor I'd bring something to the departmental mixer, and I cannot show up with store-bought again. Not after what happened last time." Zixtari's stylus hovered over her note-taking tablet. She had written "human oxygen dependent," and then, underneath it, "lemon bars?" Her tail was twitching against the floor. "What happened last time?" a Scalaron student 2 rows back asked, his scales already flushing. "Gregory ate 9 of them." "Who is Gregory?" "The point is," Harlow continued, as if this explained anything, "homemade shows effort. Anyway, Professor, you were saying? About how my planet is uninhabitable?" Professor Kethvorn gripped the edges of his crystalline podium. A small crack appeared under his left hand. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence, top, bottom, left, right, a pattern that indicated extreme cognitive distress. "The gravity," he said, forcing himself back to the lecture. "Academic radar, facts, these would anchor him. Earth's gravity is about 9.8 meters per second squared, yeah." Harlow took another sip from her container. "It's actually kind of annoying when you're trying to jump over things, fences mostly, sometimes hedges. There's a whole technique to hedge jumping that my uncle taught me, which is funny because he was afraid of birds and our neighbor had a lot of them, so really he developed the skill out of necessity. Survival adaptation, I guess you'd call it." "Your uncle," Zixtari heard herself asking, her stylus moving without conscious input, "developed survival adaptations to avoid birds?" "Specifically geese. Regular birds were fine. Well, mostly fine. There was the incident with the pelican, but that was mutual combat as far as I'm concerned." "Mutual combat?" Zixtari's scales had gone fully orange. "With a bird?" Professor Kethvorn's skin was now cycling through colors in a way that several students found genuinely hypnotic. Lavender, violet, deep purple, a flash of concerning indigo. The pelican started it, Harlow said with the tone of someone who had made this argument before, possibly in a legal setting. But that's not important. What's important is that I still don't have a lemon bar recipe and the mixer is in 3 rotational cycles. Unless that's days? I always get confused with the time conversion. Back home, I just looked at the sun. You looked, Professor Kethorn's voice had become very quiet, at your star? Sure, that's how you tell time. Sun goes up, sun goes down. Unless you're in the Arctic Circle during summer, and then it just kind of hovers there, menacingly, for months. The star, a crystalline student in the upper rows shrieked, menaces them, only seasonally. The podium cracked further. Professor Kethvorn's spines were vibrating at an audible frequency now, producing a high-pitched whine that harmonized unpleasantly with his stress chiming. Perhaps, he said, attempting to regain professional composure, we should discuss the predatory fauna. Surely the presence of apex predators explains the lack of sentient development. Oh, we'd got loads of those. Harlow brightened considerably. Bears, sharks, crocodiles, hippos. Zixtari's stylus was moving frantically, incredibly deadly. They look fat and friendly, but they will absolutely murder you. Reminds me of my high school principal, actually, which is tangentially related to why I got into xenobiology in the first place. See, we had this career fair, and Principal Morton, who had the same energy as a hippopotamus, very aggressive about tardiness. He said I'd never amount to anything if I kept skipping class to look at bugs. And I thought, well, what if I found bigger bugs, alien bugs, really showed him. You became a xenobiologist, Professor Kethvorn said slowly, his facets clicking, to spite your principal. And because bugs are neat, the two things aren't mutually exclusive. Anyway, bears. Did you want to talk about bears? He did not want to talk about bears. He was beginning to suspect he did not want to talk about anything ever again. Bears, Harlow continued, apparently not requiring consent for this topic, are fascinating because they can be trained to do circus tricks, but also they can kill you with one swipe. It's a real spectrum. My cousin dated a guy who worked with circus bears, which is how we got banned from a specific diner in Montana. The diner had really good pie, too. Apple crumble, specifically. Oh, do you think apple crumble would work for the departmental mixer instead of lemon bars? Zixtari stared at her notes. They now read, human ox wygen. Dependent lemon bars. Uncle, fears geese, heege jumping adaptation. Pelican mutual combat, legal. Arctic sun, menacing bears. Circus OR death spectrum. Apple crumble banned from Montana diner. Gregory ate 9 of something. WHO is Gregory? Is Gregory? They had progressed to a shade her species didn't have a name for. How? Professor Kethvorn's voice was barely a whisper. Do you survive? The atmosphere is corrosive. The gravity is crushing. The star menaces you seasonally. The animals exist on a spectrum between entertainment and murder. How are you standing here? Harlow considered this. She said. That's actually a really good question. I think mostly we just handle it. Like you wake up, you breathe your corrosive atmosphere, you avoid the murder animals, you look at the menacing sun. Basic Tuesday stuff. Tuesday? Day of the week. Named after a war god, I think. Or a planet. Possibly both. The Romans were weird about it. Actually, that reminds me of this documentary I watched about. Stop. Professor Kethvorn held up both crystalline arms. His skin had settled on a deep, exhausted purple. Please, I am begging you, stop. The lecture hall was a disaster. Students were clutching each other. Someone was weeping openly. The holographic death sphere had malfunctioned and was now displaying Earth's Wikipedia page, which was somehow making everything worse. I have one simple question, the professor said. One. And I need you to answer it directly, without tangents about your uncle or geese or Montana diners. I can try, Harlow said in a tone that suggested she could not. How do humans survive your planet? Harlow's face lit up. Oh, that's easy, she said, and reached into her bag. Her hand emerged holding something wrapped in foil, slightly crinkled, vaguely threatening in its mundanity. You just need one of these. Professor Kethvorn's 4 eyes focused on the foil-wrapped object. What? He asked, his spines vibrating so intensely they hummed. Is that? Harlow began unwrapping it. The entire lecture hall leaned forward. The foil crinkled in the absolute silence of Lecture Hall 7 Gamma. 300 students held their breath, those who had breath to hold. The crystalline species simply stopped vibrating. The aquatic species' gills went still. Zixtari's stylus hovered over her tablet, poised to document either salvation or annihilation. Professor Kethvorn's 4 violet eyes tracked Harlow's hands as they methodically unwrapped the object. His skin had achieved a color. His species' emotional spectrum did not technically include a sort of desperate chartreuse. The foil fell away. "Sandwich," Harlow announced, holding up 2 pieces of bread with mysterious substances between them. "Want half?" The student who had fainted earlier woke up, saw the sandwich, and fainted again. "That," Professor Kethvorn said, his vertical mouth struggling to form the word, "is your survival mechanism. I mean, not specifically this sandwich. Just sandwiches in general. Food between bread. Revolutionary technology, honestly. The Earl of Sandwich invented it because he didn't want to stop gambling to eat a real meal, which I respect as a time management strategy. Although actually I think that's disputed. Some people say it was his cook's idea. History is complicated, like my aunt's divorce, which actually involved a sandwich, now that I think about it. Not this sandwich, a different one. Turkey, I believe." Zixtari wrote, "Sandwich survival. Earl invented, cook, aunt's divorce, turkey." Her handwriting had become progressively more unhinged. The letters were starting to spiral. "You sustain yourselves," the professor attempted, gripping the cracked podium. "On compressed grain products? Bread, yeah. We also eat animals, plants, fungi, some rocks if you count salt, which I do, and occasionally things that are technically poisonous, but we figured out how to make them not kill us, mostly." Harlow took a bite of her sandwich. "Almonds, for instance. Bitter almonds have cyanide. We just deep read them until they don't. Same with potatoes, kind of. The leaves will kill you, but the underground part is fine. Usually, you have to cook it. Unless you're making potato salad, and then UEAT poison," someone screamed from the upper rows. "And cook it into submission? When you phrase it like that, it sounds weird." Harlow chewed thoughtfully. "But yes." Professor Kethvorn's segmented tail had wrapped around his own leg, a self-soothing behavior he hadn't exhibited since defending his doctoral thesis 4 centuries ago. His crystalline spines were producing a frequency that made the lecture hall's ambient lighting flicker. "Perhaps," he said, in the voice of someone clinging to sanity by their fingertips, "we should return to the curriculum. The geological instability of Earth." "Oh, the earthquakes. Yeah, those are fun." "Fun? Well, not fun, but you get used to them. California has them all the time. People throw earthquake parties. You sit under a doorframe and wait for your house to maybe fall down. It builds community." Harlow took another bite. "Speaking of California, that's where I learned to make this sandwich. My roommate was from San Francisco, which is built on a major fault line, and she had very strong opinions about sourdough bread. Apparently, the specific bacteria in San Francisco air makes the sourdough tangier. I don't know if that's true, but she was very passionate about it. Like she once got into a fistfight at a bakery over bread. It wasn't her finest moment, but the charges were dropped. CA charge? Legal ones. For the fistfight. Do you not have those here?" Zixtari's notes now included a detailed diagram attempting to connect earthquakes, sourdough bacteria, and bakery violence. She had drawn several arrows that looped back on themselves. In the margin, she had written, "IS anything real," and then underlined it 3 times. The doors to Lecture Hall 7 Gamma burst open. Dean Orith strode in, his 6 small black eyes scanning the chaos with administrative concern. His blue-gray rubbery skin glistened under the flickering lights, and his gill slits fluttered with each breath. The bioluminescent spots along his arms were pulsing in the pattern that indicated emergency situation requiring immediate bureaucratic intervention. "Professor Kethvorn," the dean said, his webbed hands clasped behind his back, "I've received 17 distress signals from this lecture hall in the past 40 time units." "Only 17? The professor's laugh had a crystalline, shattering quality. "I would have expected more." Dean Orith's gaze landed on Harlow, who waved with the hand not holding her sandwich. "Hi, you must be Dean Orith. I've heard great things." "Well, I've heard things. Mostly from the guy at the registration office who seemed stressed." "Is he okay?" He kept twitching. "You are the human." Dean Orith approached slowly, the way one might approach an unexploded ordnance. "The first human enrolled at our institution." "That's me, Harlow. Nice to meet you officially. Want some sandwich?" The dean's bioluminescent spots pulsed rapidly. "I simply need to understand the situation. Professor Kethvorn appears to be experiencing chromatic distress. Several students have been removed to medical facilities, and one crystalline in row 47 has reportedly shattered their own arm in panic." "Wait, what?" Harlow looked genuinely concerned. "Are they okay? Can crystallines regrow arms?" Actually, can anyone here regrow limbs? Because humans can't, except for liver parts and fingertips if you're a kid, which always seemed like a weird evolutionary oversight. You'd think limbs would be higher priority than fingertips, but evolution is like that, chaotic, like weather. Weather? Dean Orth asked, making the mistake of engaging. Yeah, Earth weather is pretty unpredictable. You've got your hurricanes, tornadoes, blizzards, heat waves, flash floods, sometimes multiple at once in different regions. Once I experienced 3 different weather events in the same day because I was driving across Kansas. Sunny, then hail, then a tornado warning. I stopped at a gas station, and the attendant just said, "Yep, that's Kansas," is like it was completely normal, which I guess it was, for Kansas. Tornado, Zixtari said, her voice hollow, defying tornado. Spinning column of air. Picks up houses sometimes. Cows, too, allegedly. The movie about them was pretty good, but apparently not scientifically accurate. My meteorology professor had very strong feelings about it. She threw a stapler once, at the screen, during a lecture. Reminds me of the sourdough fistfight, actually. Academics get passionate. Dean Orth's gills had stopped fluttering entirely. His bioluminescent spots were now pulsing in a pattern that Zixtari didn't recognize, possibly because her species had never needed to create a signal for fundamental reality collapse in progress. Spinning air, the dean repeated carefully, removes bovine mammals from the ground, and this is normal? For Kansas, yeah. Other places have different stuff. California has earthquakes and wildfires. Florida has hurricanes and alligators. Australia has everything, honestly. It's like the planet's difficulty setting is on maximum there. Drop bears, box jellyfish, spiders that can kill you in under an hour. Under an hour? Some faster. The funnel web spider, I think? Though the blue-ringed octopus might be quicker. I'd have to check. We have antivenoms for most of them now, which is nice. Basically, you get bitten, you go to a hospital. They pump you full of counteragents, and usually you're fine. There's a bit in the middle that's not great, but the survival rates are pretty solid these days. Professor Kethborn had sat down on the floor. His crystalline body made a gentle chiming sound as he rocked slightly back and forth. His skin had given up on expressing coherent emotions and was now cycling through colors like a screensaver. "Professor?" Zixtari asked, her scales flushing with concern. "Are you? Should I call medical?" "Medical," the professor whispered. "Yes, medical, where they will tell me I am experiencing a psychotic break, which would be preferable, because then this would not be real." "It's definitely real," Harlow offered helpfully. "The sandwich, I mean. Want to feel it?" "Physical confirmation helps sometimes. Grounding technique. My therapist recommended it." "You have therapists?" Dean Orth asked, his voice strained. "For what?" "Mental health stuff. Anxiety, depression, trauma." "What trauma?" "I mean, lots of things cause trauma. Car accidents, natural disasters, violence, loss. Oh, we also send children to special buildings for like 12 years to learn things, and apparently that's pretty traumatic for a lot of people. I actually like school, but my friend Marcus hated it. He used to hide in the janitor's closet during math class. Which reminds me of the time I hid in a closet during a tornado warning, which loops us back to Kansas. So really everything is connected if you think about it. Zixtari had stopped taking notes. Her tablet displayed a web of connections that looked like the manifesto of someone who had stared too long into the void. At the center, she had written Harlow, with radiating lines connecting to sandwiches, geese, tornadoes, Gregory, Montana, therapeutic closets, and Spider's death timer, E1 hour. "I need to ask one question," Dean Orth said, holding up a webbed hand. "One simple question." "Sure." Harlow finished her sandwich and crumpled the foil into a ball. "How do you function as a society? How does your species accomplish anything when your planet is actively trying to kill you at all times?" Harlow tilted her head, considering. That's a good one. Okay, so basically we just, Dermy, most of it. Like, you know it's there, but you've got stuff to do. Work, relationships, hobbies. You can't spend all day thinking about how the sun is giving you cancer. The sun gives you cancer? Or how the air pollution is slowly degrading your lungs? Or how the tectonic plates could shift at any moment? You'd never get anything done. So you wake up, have some breakfast, maybe check the weather to see if you need an umbrella or a tornado shelter, and then you just proceed with your day. Go to work, have meetings, argue about parking spaces. Normal stuff. "That's not normal," Dean Orth whispered. "None of that is normal." "It's normal for us." Harlow shrugged. "Oh, I just remembered. Did anyone ever find my sock? Gray, fuzzy, hole near the toe?" The non sequitur hit the room like a physical force. Several students made sounds that might have been screams, laughter, or complete mental surrender. Your sock, Professor Kethwarn said from the floor, his voice dreamy and detached, is irrelevant. Time is irrelevant. The universe is chaos wearing a thin mask of order, and your species has been tap dancing on the edge of oblivion since you crawled out of whatever irradiated ocean spawned you. That's actually kind of poetic, Harlow said. But also, I really like that sock. Dean Orith's spots were now pulsing SOS in 3 different galactic languages simultaneously. Medical Bay, he announced. Everyone, now, mandatory psychological evaluation for all attendees of this lecture. The medical bay was white, sterile, and currently overcrowded. Medical Officer Threen X, a tall Velthari with 3 eyes instead of the standard 4 a birth variation she was quite sensitive about, moved between treatment pods with increasing bewilderment. She had treated students for stress crystallization, scale discoloration, spontaneous molting, and 1 case of existential gill paralysis that she was fairly certain she'd just invented as a diagnosis. This is unprecedented, she said to Dean Orith, who had accompanied the most severe cases. What happened in that lecture? The human happened. The human who is currently. Threenix turned around. Where is the human? Harlow had wandered over to the specimen display case on the far wall. She was pressing her face against the glass, examining the preserved samples with evident fascination. Oh, cool. Is this a parasitic infection model? We have similar stuff back home. Tapeworms, mostly. They can grow up to 30 feet inside your intestines if you let them. We usually don't let them. Threenx's 3 eyes blinked out of sync. 30? Meters, I guess, in your measurement system. Maybe 9 meters? Math was never my strong suit. The point is, they're long and wiggly and gross. There's a museum in Bangkok that has a really impressive collection. My ex-boyfriend wanted to go there for our anniversary, which, looking back, should have been a red flag. The relationship ended badly. Not as badly as my aunt's turkey sandwich divorce, but definitely top 5. I need her medical readings, Threenix said to Dean Orith. Immediately. The scan took 3 minutes. The results made less sense than anything Threenix had encountered in her 2-century medical career. Her internal temperature is 37 degrees, she said, her voice flat. Her blood pressure is fluctuating. Her heart beats over 100,000 times per day. She has bacteria in her digestive system, intentionally. Her bones have been broken and healed at least twice. There's evidence of historical cellular damage from solar radiation. And she is apparently considered healthy by her species standards. Very healthy, actually, Harlow said, peering at her own scan results. My doctor said I have great cholesterol. Well, acceptable cholesterol. Well, we should keep an eye on it, cholesterol. But I'm only 32, so there's time. Oh, that reminds me, humans don't live very long. Compared to you, I mean. Maybe 80 to 100 years if we're lucky. Is that relevant? You live 80 years, Dean Orith said slowly, on a planet that menaces you seasonally, contains animals on a circus-to-death spectrum, has weaponized spinning air columns, harbors spiders with kill timers under an hour, and gives you cancer via sunlight? When you list it out like that, it does seem short, Harlow nodded. But we make it work, quality over quantity, right? Professor Kethwarn, who had been placed in a treatment pod for acute reality dissociation, began laughing. The sound echoed off the sterile walls, crystalline, chiming, and deeply unhinged. She's right, he gasped between laughs. They make it work. They made it work. They looked at their death planet and said, this is fine, and then they invented sandwiches and tap dancing in museums dedicated to intestinal parasites, and they made it work. Professor, please remain calm. I have been studying death worlds for 800 years. He sat up in his pod, skin flickering rainbow, the pattern of complete psychological surrender. I have cataloged 93 planets classified as hostile to sentient life. I have written 47 papers on the impossibility of evolution in high-gravity corrosive environments. I am the foremost expert in my field. And this woman, he pointed a crystalline arm at Harlow, has just invalidated my entire life's work by existing and asking about socks. Found it, by the way, Harlow said, holding up a gray fuzzy sock. It was in my other bag, the one with the emergency granola bars. Which reminds me, does this medical bay have a cafeteria? I could use a snack. Sandwiches don't last as long as you'd think. Threenix looked at Dean Orith. Dean Orith looked at Professor Kethwarn. Professor Kethwarn looked at Harlow, who was now putting on her sock while standing on one leg with perfect balance. The kind of balance that only develops on a high-gravity murder world or falling down might mean falling into the path of something poisonous. "I'm canceling the Death World unit," Professor Kethvorn announced. "Permanently. The subject is conceptually unstable." "You can't cancel an entire curriculum unit," Dean Orith protested, his gills fluttering weakly. "Watch me. In fact, I'm retiring, effective immediately. I'm going to go to a quiet moon somewhere and contemplate the void, maybe take up pottery. Professor, the human can teach it." Every eye in the medical bay, and there were many, across several species, turned to Harlow. She had found a vending machine and was trying to figure out how to operate it. "Sorry, what?" She looked up. "I was distracted. This thing doesn't take human currency and I'm unclear on the exchange rate. Also, what's in nutrient cylinders and does it come in chocolate?" "You," Professor Kethvorn said, climbing out of his treatment pod with newfound determination, "are going to teach my class about Earth. Because apparently theoretical knowledge is worthless, and the only way to truly understand a death world is to be lectured by someone who considers solar cancer and tornado parties to be basic Tuesday stuff." "Oh, I couldn't possibly. I insist. I don't have any teaching credentials. Irrelevant. I still don't have a lemon bar recipe. ALSOIRR relevant." Harlow considered this. Then she shrugged. "Okay, but I'm going to need a bigger holographic display. And maybe some visual aids. I have photos from my cousin's wedding that really capture the human experience." There was a fistfight at that one too, actually, and a small fire, unrelated to the fistfight, mostly. 1 week later, Lecture Hall 7 Gamma was standing room only. Word had spread across the Galactic Institute that the human was teaching a class on Earth survival. Attendance was technically optional. Every seat was filled. Students lined the walls, crowded the doorways, and in one case, clung to the ceiling via suction pads. Harlow stood at the podium, a new one, reinforced, wearing what she had described as her teaching cardigan. Behind her, a holographic display showed a photograph of a goat. "So," she said, smiling at her audience of 300 trembling aliens, "let's talk about why you should never trust a goat named Harold." Zixtari, sitting in the front row with a fresh tablet and a 1,000-yard stare, began to write. Her first note read, "Goat Harold, trust issues. This explains everything." It explained nothing, but somehow, impossibly, the class leaned in to listen anyway. 3 months into Harlow's tenure as the Galactic Institute's first human professor, Dean Orith received a formal complaint. It was not, as he had expected, about the content of her lectures. It was not about the time she brought in a live specimen she called a hamster, and half the class evacuated thinking it was a predator. It was not even about the detailed presentation on human mating rituals that had caused a crystalline student to shatter both arms simultaneously. The complaint was about attendance. "She's too popular," Professor Kethvorn said, standing in the dean's office. He had returned from his quiet moon after 2 weeks, claiming the pottery was insufficiently distracting from existential dread. His skin had settled into a permanent pale violet resignation, apparently. "Students are skipping my mineralogy lectures to attend her sessions on why humans invented competitive cheese rolling." Dean Orith's gills fluttered. "Is that, Demu, a real topic?" She showed video footage. People chase cheese down a hill. They break bones. They do it annually, for fun. The dean added this to his growing file labeled Human Documentation, Do Not Read Before Sleep. Meanwhile, in Lecture Hall 7 Gamma, Harlow was explaining the concept of pets. "So you keep predators in your homes," Zixtari said, her scales permanently stuck at a soft orange these days, deliberately, for companionship. "Dogs, cats, sometimes snakes. My neighbor had a tarantula named Gerald, sweet little guy." "Gerald," Zixtari wrote, her handwriting now a perfect spiral. "Tarantula? Sweet." She had stopped questioning the connections. They all had. Because somewhere between the tornado parties and the cheese rolling and the goat named Harold, the galaxy had quietly accepted a terrifying truth. Humans didn't survive their death world despite the chaos. They survived because of it. And somehow, inexplicably, they'd brought snacks.